Story 1. I never believed in ghosts until that weekend at Salton Sea. My name's Mike. I work construction in San Diego, and when my Uncle Jerry passed unexpectedly, someone had to clear out his place. None of my other relatives wanted anything to do with it. They all said the same thing. That place gives me the creeps. I arrived Friday afternoon. The town looked abandoned. Boarded up buildings, crumbling infrastructure, and that unmistakable smell of decay from the receding shoreline. Jerry's house sat about half a mile from the water, a small bungalow surrounded by dead palm trees. The first thing that hit me was the silence. No cars, no people, not even birds. Just the occasional sound of the toxic water lapping at the salt-crusted shore in the distance. "Hello?" I called out as I pulled into the driveway, not expecting an answer, but feeling weird about the total absence of anything. I unlocked the front door with the key the lawyer had given me. The inside was cluttered but not filthy, typical bachelor pad of an old guy living alone. Photos of family on the walls, furniture from the 70s, and a television that probably weighed 100 pounds. I got to work sorting through his belongings, piling things into donate, trash, and keep categories. By sunset, I'd made decent progress, mostly in the kitchen and living room. That's when the power went out. "Perfect," I muttered, fumbling for my phone to use as a flashlight. I tried calling the power company but couldn't get service. Jerry didn't have a landline. I figured I'd just call it a night and start fresh in the morning. I found some candles in a kitchen drawer and set them up in the living room where I'd laid out my sleeping bag. As I was lighting the last one, I heard footsteps on the front porch. Relief washed over me. Finally, another human being. Maybe a neighbor coming to introduce themselves. I went to the door and opened it. "Hello?" Nobody was there. The porch was empty, and beyond it, the street was dark and still. Not a single light anywhere, not even from distant houses. "Must be hearing things," I said to myself, closing and locking the door. I settled onto the couch with one of Jerry's old fishing magazines, trying to ignore how loudly my voice had echoed in the emptiness outside. Around midnight, I dozed off but woke suddenly to what sounded like someone in the kitchen. Dishes clinking, water running. "Hello?" I called out, heart pounding. "Is someone there?" The sound stopped immediately. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight again, creeping toward the kitchen. Empty, but the faucet was dripping. I was sure I'd turned it off completely before going to bed. I tightened the handle and returned to the living room, telling myself it was just loose plumbing in an old house. That's when I noticed the smell. Not the usual salt and sea stench of dead fish and algae, but something else. Something like wet earth and decay suddenly filling the house, and the temperature had dropped dramatically. My breath was visible in the beam of my flashlight. "This is crazy," I whispered, but my voice sounded strange, like it was being absorbed by the cold air around me. Then I heard it, very clearly, someone walking down the hallway toward Jerry's bedroom. Heavy footsteps, purposeful. I froze, listening. The footsteps stopped at what I knew was Jerry's bedroom door. Then came the sound of the door opening, creaking hinges, followed by the thud of it closing. Every instinct told me to get out of that house, but I couldn't leave without knowing who or what was there. Plus, my car keys were in my backpack, in Jerry's bedroom. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice cracking. "I'm armed." I wasn't, but it seemed like the thing to say. No response. I slowly made my way down the hallway, phone flashlight extended in front of me like a weapon. The bedroom door was closed. I hadn't closed it earlier when I dropped off my backpack. My hands shook as I reached for the doorknob. It was ice cold. I pushed the door open and shined my light inside. The room was empty, but my backpack had been moved from where I'd left it on the bed to the center of the floor, and around it, wet footprints, as if someone had waded through water to place it there. The closet door was ajar. "Hello?" I called again, but the word died in my throat as the closet door began to open further, all by itself. I stood frozen, watching as it swung fully open to reveal Jerry's clothes still hanging there. Behind them, the back wall of the closet seemed wrong somehow, darker, deeper than it should be. Then I heard a voice, so quiet I almost missed it, coming from inside the closet. "You shouldn't have come." It wasn't threatening. It sounded like a warning. I backed out of the room slowly, then turned and ran. I didn't care about my backpack or my keys or anything else. I unlocked the front door with fumbling fingers and burst outside into the night. The street was still completely deserted. No lights, no people, just darkness and that overwhelming silence. My car was still in the driveway. I tried the door, unlocked, thank God. I felt in my pocket. My car keys were there, but I'd left them in my backpack, hadn't I? I started the engine and pulled away, tires squealing, not looking back at the house. In my rearview mirror, I could see only darkness. I drove without stopping, heading back toward San Diego, the main highway eerily empty the entire way. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see headlights following me, but there was nothing. The real estate agent called me Monday to ask how the cleanup was going. I told her I wasn't going back. Ever. She wasn't surprised. "Nobody ever stays long in those houses," she said matter-of-factly, "especially not your uncle's." When I asked what she meant, she hesitated. "You don't know how he died, do you?" I didn't. They found him in that closet. No signs of trauma. Medical examiner said his heart just stopped. From fear. I sold the house without clearing it out. Took a loss. Some things aren't worth the money. And to this day, I'll never understand how my keys got from my backpack into my pocket. Or whose footprints I saw on that bedroom floor. Or why, when I checked my phone the next day, I had exactly one photo I didn't remember taking. A blurry image of Jerry's bedroom closet, with what looks like a face peering out from the darkness behind his clothes. Story 2, I never should have gone back to Centralia. That's what keeps running through my mind as I try to sleep at night in my apartment 3 states away. It's been 6 months since my visit, and I still wake up drenched in sweat, feeling the heat rising from beneath my bed. I grew up about 20 miles from Centralia in a small Pennsylvania coal town, but my parents always warned us to stay away from that cursed place. Of course, as teenagers, my friends and I would sometimes drive out there on dares, but we never stayed long. Just long enough to see the smoke seeping from cracks in the earth, take some pictures of the abandoned buildings, and get the hell out. After college, I moved to Chicago and hardly thought about Centralia for years until my grandmother passed away. After the funeral, something compelled me to visit. Morbid curiosity, I guess. I told my sister I needed some time alone and borrowed her car for what I said would be a scenic drive. She looked at me strangely when I mentioned which direction I was heading but didn't try to stop me. It was late October, colder than usual. The trees should have been bursting with fall colors, but as I approached Centralia, the landscape grew increasingly barren. I parked at the edge of town, near what was once the main street. A light fog hung in the air, mingling with wisps of smoke rising from fissures in the ground. They say only 5 or 6 people still live in Centralia. Stubborn holdouts who refuse government relocation. I didn't expect to see anyone, which is why my heart nearly stopped when I spotted a figure standing at the far end of the abandoned highway. "Hello?" I called out, immediately regretting breaking the silence. The figure didn't move. I couldn't tell if it was a man or woman, just a dark silhouette partly obscured by the fog. I told myself it was probably just another tourist, or maybe a documentary filmmaker. Centralia attracts all types of weirdos fascinated by disaster. "Sorry to bother you," I called out again. "Just passing through." Still no response. The figure remained motionless. I decided to ignore it and continue exploring, heading toward the famous graffiti highway, though I'd heard they'd covered it with dirt recently to discourage visitors. As I walked, I could feel heat radiating through the soles of my shoes. It was subtle but unmistakable. The underground fire that had been burning since 1962 was still very much alive, devouring coal seams hundreds of feet below the surface. In some places, the ground was warm enough to melt snow in winter. I paused to snap a photo of steam rising from a particularly large crack in the asphalt when my phone suddenly died. Full battery to nothing in seconds. Annoyed, I pocketed it and kept walking. That's when I noticed the silence. No birds, no insects, not even wind. Just the occasional soft hiss of toxic gases escaping from the earth. I rounded a corner where St. Ignatius Church once stood, before they tore it down. In its place was nothing but an empty lot. The figure again, standing perfectly still, closer now, maybe 50 yards away. "Hey!" I shouted, a mixture of fear and irritation in my voice. "What do you want?" The figure tilted its head slightly but remained silent. This time I changed direction, heading toward what used to be the town cemetery. Most of the bodies had been exhumed and relocated decades ago when they realized the fire wasn't going out anytime soon. I remembered my mom telling me stories about graves opening up from the heat, but I always thought she was just trying to scare me. The cemetery was mostly empty plots with a few forgotten headstones. The ground here felt even hotter, and small tendrils of smoke rose between graves like ghostly fingers reaching for the sky. I was about to leave when I heard footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate steps on the brittle dead grass. "I know someone's following me," I said without turning around. "It's not funny." "You shouldn't be here," a voice finally answered, raspy, genderless, like someone who'd inhaled too much smoke. "Nobody should be here anymore." I turned slowly. The figure stood no more than 10 feet away now. Through the haze, I could make out dirty overalls and a face blackened with what looked like coal dust. Their eyes reflected the dim light oddly, almost glowing. "I'm just visiting," I managed to say. "I'll be leaving soon." "That's what they all said." The figure gestured vaguely around. "Said the fire would burn itself out. Said it was contained. Said it was safe to stay." I took a step back, feeling the ground shift slightly beneath my feet. "Are you one of the residents who stayed?" The figure laughed, a horrible, hollow sound. "I never left. None of us did. Not really." As they spoke, I noticed something profoundly wrong with their shadow. While the figure stood motionless, their shadow seemed to flicker and writhe on the ground, stretching in impossible directions. "I should go," I whispered, taking another step back. Suddenly, the ground gave way beneath my heel. Not much, just enough for my foot to sink a few inches into unexpectedly soft earth. Heat surged up my leg like I'd stepped in scalding water. I screamed and jumped forward, nearly colliding with the figure. They didn't move to help me or back away, just watched with those reflective eyes as I frantically checked my leg. My jeans were intact, but I could feel a burn forming on my calf. "The fire always finds a way up," the figure said. "Gets hungrier every year." That's when I noticed other silhouettes emerging from the smoke and fog. 5, maybe 6 of them, all with the same coal-blackened appearance, all with shadows that moved independently of their bodies. "How many people still live here?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Depends what you mean by live," the figure replied. The ground beneath us groaned, an actual, audible groan, like a massive creature stirring in its sleep. A new crack formed between me and the figure, widening slowly as acrid smoke poured out. I ran. I didn't look back until I reached my sister's car. The figures hadn't followed, but they had all moved to stand in a line at the edge of the cemetery, watching me leave. As I fumbled with the keys, my phone suddenly came back to life in my pocket, buzzing with dozens of delayed notifications. The screen was hot to the touch, almost too hot to hold. I drove away faster than was safe on those broken roads, watching the ruins of Centralia disappear in my rearview mirror. Just before I turned onto the main highway, I swear I saw all those figures raise their arms in unison, as if waving goodbye. Story 3. I never tell anyone this story. Not even my wife knows the full details of what happened that night in Tonopah. I was 26, working as a sales rep for a medical equipment company in Vegas. My territory included all those forgotten Nevada towns scattered across the desert like abandoned toys. Usually I'd make day trips, but this particular route meant an overnight stay. When my GPS directed me to the Clown Motel, I almost laughed. Almost. The building itself was unremarkable. Just another budget roadside motel with peeling paint and a flickering vacancy sign. But the lobby, Jesus Christ. Hundreds of clown figurines, dolls, and paintings covered every surface, their glass eyes following me as I approached the counter. "Just you tonight?" asked the older man behind the desk. His weathered face reminded me of leather left too long in the sun. "Yeah, just one night." He handed me a key, an actual metal key, not a key card. "Room 217. You're in luck. It's one of our special rooms." "Special how?" I asked. A thin smile stretched across his face. "It's where I keep my personal collection. I paint them myself." Fantastic. Oh, and don't mind the cemetery, he added, gesturing vaguely toward the window. It's just over there. Mostly miners who died in the 1901 disaster. A lot of children, too. The cemetery stretched out behind the motel like a silent neighbor. Crumbling headstones tilting at odd angles, many too worn to read. I tried not to look at it as I lugged my overnight bag to room 217. The room itself was standard cheap motel fare. Queen bed with a faded floral comforter, laminate dresser, ancient TV, except for the clowns. At least a dozen paintings hung on every wall. Crude amateur portraits of clown faces with expressions that didn't quite match their smiling mouths. Their eyes seemed to follow me around the room. I tried calling my girlfriend but couldn't get reception. Tonopah sits in this dead zone between cell towers, and the motel's Wi-Fi password didn't work. Complete isolation. After a microwave dinner from the gas station down the road, I tried to sleep. The desert goes eerily quiet at night, a thick silence that makes your ears strain for any sound. Around 1 a.m., I found one. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps directly above my room. Thump. Pause. Thump. Pause. It sounded like someone wearing work boots, walking slowly from one end of the room to the other. Back and forth. Back and forth. I called the front desk. No answer. Of course. The footsteps continued for exactly 15 minutes before stopping abruptly. I convinced myself it was just another guest, though something about the rhythmic, mechanical nature of those steps felt wrong. At 2 a.m., it started again. Thump. Pause. Thump. Same pattern, same duration. 15 minutes exactly. At 3 a.m., I was waiting for it. The footsteps returned, but this time I had questions. The motel was a single-story building. There shouldn't be a room above me at all. After the third cycle of footsteps, I couldn't take it anymore. I threw on jeans and a t-shirt and went outside, circling the building to see if there was some partial second floor I hadn't noticed. Nothing. Just a flat roof with a few AC units. When I returned to my room, something had changed. One of the clown paintings, the largest one directly across from the bed, was different. The clown's head was tilted slightly, like someone had adjusted the frame. But it wasn't the frame that had moved. The painted face itself had shifted position. I stood frozen, staring at it. That's when I noticed the silence. The desert night, which had been completely still before, now hummed with faint whispers. I couldn't make out words, just the cadence of hushed voices coming from behind the walls, above the ceiling, everywhere and nowhere. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone to use as a flashlight. No service, but at least the flashlight worked. I examined the painting up close, trying to convince myself I was just tired and seeing things. The clown's painted eyes blinked. I stumbled backward, slamming into the dresser behind me. The whispers grew louder, and I swear to God I could hear children laughing mixed in with them. I grabbed my keys and bolted for the door, not even bothering with my luggage. As I fumbled with the lock, I made the mistake of looking back at the room. All the clown paintings were facing me now, regardless of where they had been hung. Every painted face was turned in my direction, eyes wide, smiles stretched impossibly wider than before. I ran to my car and drove. I didn't stop until I reached Las Vegas, pulling into my apartment parking lot as the sun was coming up. I called in sick that day. When my boss demanded I return to finish the Tonopah route, I quit on the spot. Found a new job within a week, one that didn't require travel. I'd never stayed in another motel again, and I never ever went back to Tonopah. Story 4, I never planned on stopping in Amboy. Hell, I didn't even know it existed until my piece of crap Civic started making that death rattle sound halfway between Barstow and 29 Palms. I'm Jake, military brat turned contractor, heading back to base after a weekend in Vegas that wasn't worth the hangover. It was July, pushing 110 degrees, and my AC had died 2 hours back. All I wanted was to get back to my crappy apartment before sundown. The sign said Amboy 5 miles with a little gas pump icon. Thank God. I nursed my car along Route 66, that forgotten stretch of Americana that tourism forgot. Just me, miles of sun-bleached desert, and whatever was slowly destroying my transmission. Amboy isn't even a proper town. It's a ghost, A derelict gas station, some abandoned buildings, and Roy's Motel and Cafe. This faded mid-century relic with a sign that's more rust than neon. Total population, 4 people. That's not a typo. 4 human beings choose to live in that forsaken place. I pulled into Roy's just as the sun was starting to sink. The temperature was finally dropping, but something else was making my skin prickle. The place was empty except for an ancient Ford pickup and a guy in his 60s standing out front, watching me like he'd been expecting me specifically. "Radiator?" he called out before I'd even fully stopped. "Transmission, I think," I replied, killing the engine and stepping out. The silence hit me immediately. No highway noise, no birds, nothing but the ticking of my cooling engine. "Name's Earl," he said, not offering a hand. "Got a tow truck, but Barstow's the nearest place for parts. Won't be till tomorrow." "Great. Just fucking great." "Got a room if you need it," Earl continued, nodding toward the motel. "50 cash. Phone works sometimes." I looked at my phone. No service, of course. Then back at the empty highway, stretching in both directions. The sun was already touching the mountains. I wasn't going anywhere. "I'll take it," I said, grabbing my duffel from the back seat. The room was straight out of the 1950s. Faded floral bedspread, wood paneling, and a TV that probably got 3 channels on a good day. I tried the phone, but all I got was static and what sounded like someone breathing before the line went dead. Earl had mentioned there was a microwave meal in the mini fridge and that the cafe part hadn't been open for years. I ate what tasted like cardboard lasagna and watched the sun vanish completely, leaving nothing but a vast blanket of stars. With nothing else to do, I decided to step outside for a smoke. The desert night was cool now, almost pleasant, and the Milky Way was brilliant overhead, without any light pollution. It would have been beautiful if not for that persistent feeling that something was off. I was about to head back in when headlights appeared on the highway, approaching fast from the east. Finally, another person. Maybe they had cell service or could give me a ride to Barstow in the morning. The car, a newer model SUV, slowed as it approached Roy's, then pulled in and parked a few spaces from my dead Civic. I took a drag of my cigarette, waiting for them to get out. Nobody did. The engine shut off, the headlights died, but no doors opened. I couldn't see clearly through the tinted windows, but it looked like there was just a single silhouette in the driver's seat. "Hey there," I called out after 30 seconds of nothing. "You checking in?" No response. I flicked my cigarette away and stepped closer. "Everything okay?" That's when I heard it, a sound coming from inside the SUV that made my blood freeze. It wasn't quite crying and wasn't quite laughter. It was this horrible, breathy gasping that sounded like someone trying to do both at once. I backed away slowly. "I'm gonna get Earl," I said, louder than necessary. The sound stopped immediately. I turned to walk to what I assumed was Earl's quarters when the SUV's door finally opened. The dome light should have come on, but it didn't. Just darkness and that same silhouette now standing beside the vehicle. "Car trouble?" The voice was female, but wrong somehow, like someone doing a bad impression of a woman's voice. "No, I'm good," I replied, backing toward my room. "Just staying the night." She laughed, and it was that same horrible gasping sound. "No one just stays in Amboy." That's when she stepped into the dim light from the motel sign, and I saw her face. Or rather, what should have been her face. It was just wrong. Like someone had taken human features and rearranged them slightly. Her eyes were too wide apart, her smile stretched literally from ear to ear, and her skin had this waxy quality that caught the light in ways skin shouldn't. "What the fuck?" I whispered, fumbling for my door handle. "They always run," not a woman said, head tilting at an impossible angle. "Earl said you wouldn't, but they always do." I got my door open and slammed it shut behind me, fumbling with the flimsy lock and the security chain. Through the thin curtains, I could see her silhouette approaching my room with an unnatural, jerky gait. The doorknob rattled. "Just one night," the voice said, no longer even trying to sound human. "One night in Amboy is all it takes." I backed away from the door, looking frantically around the room for a weapon, a way out, anything. The rattling stopped, and for a moment, I thought maybe she'd given up. Then I heard that laugh right outside my bathroom window, which I'd left open to let in the cool night air. I grabbed my keys and duffel and yanked open the door, prepared to make a run for it. Anywhere but here. But the parking lot was empty. No SUV, no woman thing. Just my dead Civic, Earl's pickup, and the endless, silent desert. I didn't sleep that night. At first light, I started walking east along Route 66, thumb out whenever I heard a vehicle approaching. The third car stopped, a family heading to the Grand Canyon. They looked at me strangely when I said I'd broken down in Amboy. "That old ghost town," the father said. "Place has been completely abandoned for years. Not even that Roy's place is open anymore." I turned to look back the way I'd come, where I could still see Roy's sign in the distance. "But I stayed there last night," I insisted. "Guy named Earl." The wife and husband exchanged glances. "Mister," he said carefully, "the only Earl in Amboy was that caretaker who went crazy back in the 90s. Killed 4 tourists before they got him. I don't know what I stayed in that night. All I know is I left my car and everything I owned in Amboy, and no force on earth could make me go back to find out." Story 5, I never believed in ghost towns until I found myself in Elgin, Kansas. Not the manufactured tourist trap kind, but the real deal. A place that should have died decades ago, but somehow refused to. I'm Ryan, a trucker from Missouri. Been hauling freight across the Midwest for 15 years. Seen pretty much everything these back roads have to offer. At least that's what I thought before last October. I was taking a shortcut through southern Kansas when my GPS died. No big deal, I figured. Clear day, decent roads, I'd find my way. Then my truck started making this weird rattling sound that I couldn't ignore. There was no cell reception, but my map showed a small dot labeled Elgin about 3 miles ahead. Seemed like my best option. The first thing that hit me was how unnaturally quiet it was. No birds, no bugs, nothing. Just dead silence as I pulled onto this massive brick road, way too wide for the handful of buildings lining it. Signs of life were minimal. A dim light in what might have been a general store, an American flag hanging limp on a pole, a dog that watched me but didn't bark. I parked in front of what looked like it might once have been a garage and stepped out. The air felt heavy, like right before a storm, but the sky was clear. "Hello?" I called out. My voice seemed to drop dead in the air. No answer, but I felt eyes on me. Looking up, I caught a curtain falling back into place in a second-story window. Then movement from another building, someone ducking back around a corner. "Just need some help with my truck," I called out, trying to sound casual despite the growing unease in my gut. That's when I heard it, the slow, rhythmic squeak of wheels that needed oil. Coming from behind a brick building with trees actually growing through broken windows. I turned toward the sound, and there she was. A woman in what must have once been a white wedding dress, now yellowed and torn in places, pushing an antique baby carriage. Her hair was matted, hanging in dirty clumps around a face that was both young and somehow ancient. She moved with a stiff, deliberate gait, her eyes fixed straight ahead. "Excuse me, ma'am," I said, stepping toward her. "Is there a mechanic in town?" She stopped, the carriage wheels giving one final squeak. Slowly, she turned her head toward me. Her eyes were empty, not vacant like someone on drugs, but literally empty, like looking into 2 holes. "He doesn't like strangers," she said, her voice cracking like she hadn't used it in years. "Who doesn't?" I asked. Without answering, she tilted the carriage toward me. I knew I shouldn't look. Everything in my body screamed at me to get back in my truck and drive. Rattling engine be damned. But I looked anyway. Inside wasn't a baby. It was a porcelain doll, ancient and cracked, its painted eyes scratched out. But as I stared, I swear to God, its chest moved up and down, just once, like it was taking a breath. "Jesus Christ," I whispered, stumbling backward. The woman smiled then, revealing teeth blackened with age. "He's coming to meet you," she said. "Who is?" My voice was shaking now. She leaned in close enough that I could smell her, like soil and old fabric. "The mayor," she whispered almost tenderly. "He loves new blood." From somewhere deeper in town, a bell began to toll. Not a church bell, something smaller, like a handbell being rung with slow deliberation. The woman's face changed, panic replacing that eerie calm. "You need to go," she hissed urgently. "Now! He's calling the town. I didn't need to be told twice. I was already backing toward my truck when I noticed figures emerging from buildings all around the main street. People of all ages walking with that same stiff gait as the woman, all moving toward the sound of the bell. All of them had those same empty eyes. The woman clutched my arm with surprising strength. "Not that way," she said, pointing to a dirt road leading out of town. "Take the cattle path. Don't stop until you cross water." I yanked free of her grip and ran for my truck. The engine started on the first try. No rattle, nothing. As I pulled away, I looked in my rearview mirror. The crowd had gathered in the center of that too-wide brick road. In their midst stood a tall figure in what looked like an old-fashioned suit, ringing a small brass bell. He stopped ringing and slowly raised his head toward my departing truck. I floored it, taking the dirt road out of town. Didn't slow down until I crossed a small bridge over a creek about 5 miles later. Never reported what happened. Who would believe me? But I check the news sometimes for anything about Elgin, Kansas. Never find anything. According to most maps now, the town doesn't even exist anymore. Story 6. There's something deeply unsettling about Covington, Virginia, that I can't quite shake, even years later. I never planned to visit. I was working as a bank contractor, the guy who knocks on doors when payments are missed, when my territory expanded into Western Virginia. Just another day, another stack of addresses. The approach to Covington still haunts me. I was driving through the Allegheny Mountains when my GPS directed me down a winding road that seemed to disappear into dense woodland. The trees grew impossibly close to the road, creating this tunnel effect that made me feel like I was being swallowed. Then came the fog. It wasn't normal fog. It hung motionless in the air, thick as cotton, with an unnatural yellowish tint. My headlights barely penetrated it. I slowed to maybe 15 miles per hour, white-knuckling the steering wheel, straining to see the road ahead. After what felt like forever, I emerged from the fog bank as suddenly as I'd entered it, like crossing some invisible boundary. The silence hit me immediately. I actually pulled over and stepped out of my car because it was so strange. No birds, no insects, not even wind. Just dead silence. The smell was next, a sickly, sweet, rotten stench that I later learned came from the paper mill, like hot garbage and sulfur mixed together. From the ridge, I could see Covington below. It didn't look real. The town was nestled in a valley, surrounded by mountains, with this yellowish haze hanging above it. The buildings looked faded, like an old photograph. Some industrial structures dominated one side of town, belching plumes of whatever was creating that horrible smell. As I drove into town, the strangeness only intensified. Main Street was lined with empty storefronts, not just closed for the day, but abandoned. Faded for lease signs hung in windows covered with years of grime. The few businesses that remained open had this desperate quality to them, but it was the people that really got to me. They moved differently, slower, almost mechanical. When I stopped at a gas station, the attendant stared through me rather than at me. His eyes were bloodshot, his skin gray. When he spoke, his voice was flat, emotionless. "You passing through?" he asked, not looking up from the register. "Here on business," I replied. "Just for the day." He nodded slowly. "Most folks don't stay long." At one house on my list, an elderly woman answered the door. Before I could even introduce myself, she grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong, and whispered, "They're watching. They're always watching." I asked who she meant, but she just shook her head and shut the door. The final straw came when I was heading to my last address of the day. I turned onto a residential street and immediately noticed 2 Confederate flags and 1 unmistakable Nazi flag hanging from adjacent porches. 3 men sat in lawn chairs beneath them, following my car with their eyes as I drove past. I decided the last address could wait. I made a U-turn and headed back toward the highway, accelerating perhaps faster than I should have. As I climbed back up into the mountains, I checked my rearview mirror. Covington lay behind me, that strange yellowish haze hovering above it like a curse. When I hit the fog bank again, I felt a strange relief, like I was passing back through a barrier into the normal world. I've been to hundreds of struggling towns across America in my line of work. I've seen poverty, abandonment, and despair. But Covington was different. It wasn't just dying. It felt like it was already dead, but refused to lie down. like the whole town was caught in some purgatory between existence and oblivion. I reported that I couldn't complete the final address due to safety concerns and requested it be reassigned. My supervisor didn't question it. To this day, I take the long way around if my route might pass near Covington. Some places just feel wrong, like they exist slightly out of sync with the rest of the world. Covington is one of those places, a town that time forgot, or perhaps a town that time is actively trying to erase. Story 7. I never believed in gut feelings until Wallace, Idaho. My name's Tara, 32, from Portland. My boyfriend Drew and I were on a road trip through the Northwest last summer when our car started making this weird clicking sound somewhere on Interstate 90. "We should stop and get it checked out," Drew said, squinting at a highway sign. "Looks like there's a town called Wallace coming up in about 10 miles. I Googled it quickly. Says here it's this historic mining town. Supposedly the whole place is on the National Historic Register. When we pulled into Wallace, the town seemed picture perfect at first. Victorian buildings lined the streets, with mountains looming on all sides. But something felt off. The few locals we passed on the sidewalk stared at us with blank expressions. "Friendly bunch," Drew muttered as we parked outside a garage. The mechanic, a weathered guy in his 60s, told us he couldn't look at the car until morning. With no other options, we walked to the Brooks Hotel, this old 3-story brick building in the center of town. The lobby was empty except for an elderly woman at the front desk who barely looked up from her crossword puzzle. "We need a room for the night," Drew said. She slid a paper form and an actual metal key across the counter. "Room 212, second floor. Continental breakfast starts at 6. The room was clean but dated, floral wallpaper, brass bed frame, ancient radiator in the corner. I opened the window to let in some air and noticed a man standing directly across the street, just staring up at our window. "Drew, come look at this." By the time he joined me, the man was gone. "Probably just some local," Drew said with a shrug. "Want to grab dinner?" We found a diner a block away. The place was half full, but conversation stopped when we walked in. The waitress was polite enough but didn't smile once during our meal. Back at the hotel, we watched TV for a while before Drew fell asleep. I couldn't shake this growing uneasiness. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway that stopped right outside our door. The doorknob rattled slightly. I froze, not wanting to wake Drew in case I was imagining things. The rattling stopped after a minute, and the footsteps continued down the hall. I must have fallen asleep eventually because I woke up suddenly at 3:17 a.m. I remember checking my phone. Something had jolted me awake. The room was freezing cold despite the radiator running. That's when I noticed the window was open wider than we'd left it. "Drew," I whispered, shaking him. "Did you open the window more?" "Huh? No," he mumbled, still half asleep. I got up to close it and nearly screamed. Across the street, in the exact same spot as before, stood the man. Even in the darkness, I could tell he was looking directly at our window, at me, and he was smiling. "Drew," I hissed, "there's someone watching us." This time Drew saw him too. What the hell? The man didn't move, didn't try to hide. He just kept staring up with that unsettling smile. "I'm calling the front desk," I said, reaching for the hotel phone. No dial tone. Drew grabbed his cell phone. No service either. When we looked back out the window, the man was gone. But then we heard it, footsteps on the fire escape outside our window. Slow, deliberate, coming up. "We're leaving, now," Drew said, throwing our stuff into bags. We didn't wait for the elevator, taking the stairs instead. The lobby was empty. We left the key on the counter and practically ran to our car. As Drew fumbled with the keys, I looked back at the hotel. Every window was dark except for one on the 3rd floor. A figure stood there watching us. "Drew, hurry!" The car started on the first try. No clicking sound, nothing wrong with it at all. We drove until we hit Coeur d'Alene, nearly an hour away. Spent the night in the car at a well-lit rest stop. Too freaked out to stop anywhere closer to Wallace. The next morning, I called the Brooks Hotel to explain why we'd left, figuring they'd charged our card already. "Brooks Hotel," answered a young man's voice. I explained about leaving suddenly in the middle of the night from room 212. There was a long pause. "Ma'am, the Brooks Hotel doesn't have a room 212. The entire second floor has been closed for renovation since March." I never looked up Wallace, Idaho again. Don't plan to visit ever again either. Some places just feel wrong, like they're watching you, waiting for you. Wallace was watching us that night, and I'm convinced if we'd stayed until morning, we wouldn't have left at all. Story 8. I wasn't planning to stay in Medicine Bow. Nobody plans to stay in Medicine Bow. But when my car broke down on that empty stretch of Wyoming highway, just as the sun was setting, I didn't have much choice. The town looked like it was frozen in time, and not in a charming, tourist trap kind of way. More like something had sucked the life out of it decades ago, and nobody had bothered to tell the few remaining residents. "Just need a room for the night," I told the old man at the hotel desk. He barely looked up, just slid a heavy brass key across the counter. "Room 14, end of the hall. Don't mind the paintings." His voice was gravelly from years of cigarettes, his eyes never meeting mine. "Don't mind the what?" I asked. But he had already turned away, shuffling back through a door behind the counter. The hotel lobby looked like it hadn't been updated since Teddy Roosevelt was president. Faded floral wallpaper, worn wooden floors that creaked with every step, and the unmistakable smell of decay, barely masked by cheap lemon cleaner. I grabbed my overnight bag and headed down the dimly lit hallway. The lights flickered as I walked, casting strange shadows from the Victorian-era paintings that lined the walls. Grim-faced men and women stared out from ornate frames, their eyes seeming to follow me. Room 14 wasn't much better than the hallway. A sagging bed with an ancient quilt, water stains on the ceiling, and more of those damn paintings. I flipped on the bathroom light and immediately spotted mouse droppings along the baseboards. "Great," I muttered, dropping my bag on the bed. I'd been driving all day, heading home to Denver after visiting my sister in Montana. Too tired to care about the state of the room, I decided to just crash and deal with my car in the morning. The mechanic in town had closed hours ago. After a quick, lukewarm shower in the rust-stained bathtub, I slipped under the covers and checked my phone. No service, of course. I set my alarm anyway and placed it on the nightstand, then turned off the lamp. That's when I first heard it, a soft scratching sound from the wall behind the headboard. "Just mice," I told myself, pulling the covers up higher. The old building probably had them everywhere, judging by the droppings I'd seen. I must have dozed off because the next thing I knew, I was waking up to the sound of whispering. My eyes shot open, but the room was pitch black. The whispers continued. 2 voices, maybe 3, too quiet to make out words, but definitely human. I reached for my phone to check the time and turn on the flashlight. 3:17 a.m. The whispers stopped the moment the light came on. The room looked exactly as I'd left it. Empty. I was alone. "Hello?" I called out, feeling stupid even as I said it. Silence. I got up and checked the bathroom. Empty. The closet. Empty. I even looked under the bed, half expecting to find someone hiding there. Nothing. Back in bed, I kept the phone's flashlight on, propped against the lamp. The whispers didn't return, and eventually I drifted back to sleep. I woke again at 4:52 a.m., this time to the sound of footsteps, heavy, deliberate steps crossing the room from the door to the bed. My blood ran cold as I realized I could actually see the floorboards depressing slightly with each step, as if under invisible weight. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Just watched as those footsteps approached my bed, the ancient wood creaking under each step. They stopped at the edge of the bed, right beside me. The mattress dipped as if someone had sat down. I could feel the pressure against my hip, the unmistakable sensation of a body sitting there. Then came the smell, damp earth and something metallic, like old coins. The lamp on the nightstand flickered to life. I hadn't touched it. The light was dim, yellowish, barely illuminating the room. But it was enough to see that the painting above the bed had changed. Before, it had been a stern-looking woman in a high-collared dress. Now it showed a man with hollow eyes and a twisted smile, wearing clothes from another century. And his face, God, his face was looking directly at me. Not in the way paintings seem to follow you with their eyes, but actively looking at me, his head slightly turned in a way it hadn't been before. As I stared at the painting, frozen in terror, the man's smile widened. Not in the painting. On the actual canvas, his expression changed right before my eyes. That's when I felt cold fingers brush against my arm. I screamed, throwing myself out of the bed, stumbling toward the door. The light bulb in the lamp exploded, plunging the room back into darkness. The doorknob was ice cold under my desperate grip. I wrenched it open and ran into the hallway, not looking back. The old man at the front desk didn't seem surprised to see me burst into the lobby at 5 a.m., wild-eyed and shaking. He just looked up from his newspaper with a weary expression. "Told you not to mind the paintings," he said. I was in my car 10 minutes later, driving away from Medicine Bow with the first light of dawn, ignoring the check engine light, pushing that piece of junk as fast as it would go. The mechanic could keep my deposit. I was never going back. Story 9. I never wanted to visit Las Vegas. Everyone always talked about the lights, the gambling, the shows, but something about it just seemed off to me. Still, when my buddy Jake scored comp rooms at the Bellagio for his bachelor party, I couldn't say no without looking like a complete asshole. That was 3 weeks ago. I haven't slept right since. I'm Tim, by the way. I work construction back in Pittsburgh, normal guy with a normal life. I'd never even been west of Chicago before this trip. The first 2 days were exactly what you'd expect. Overpriced drinks, losing money we couldn't afford to lose, and Jake getting progressively more wasted as the weekend went on. By Saturday night, I was ready for a break from the endless casino floor noise and the desperate energy of the place. "I'm gonna grab some air," I told Jake while he was up $200 at the blackjack table. He barely noticed me leave. I wandered outside, past the elaborate fountains and down the strip. It was around 3 a.m., but the sidewalks were still packed with tourists and hustlers. The longer I walked, the more uncomfortable I felt. Every smiling face seemed like a mask hiding something sinister. Every conversation felt rehearsed. I ducked down a side street to escape the crowd and immediately regretted it. The glitz vanished instantly, replaced by the actual Vegas. Run-down buildings, empty lots, people sleeping in doorways. That's when I saw her. She was standing under a flickering streetlight about half a block ahead, facing away from me. Something about her posture wasn't right. Too still, too rigid. She wore what looked like an old cocktail waitress uniform, something from the 70s maybe. I should have turned around, I know that now. Instead, I called out, "Hey, you okay?" She didn't move. I took a few steps closer. "Miss, you need help or something?" She turned then, but not like a person turns. It was more like, Jesus, it was like a mannequin being rotated. Her body moved in one piece, no shifting of weight, no natural movement. And her face, I've tried to describe her face to my therapist, but I can't find the words. It wasn't disfigured exactly. It was beautiful in a way, but wrong. Like someone who'd never seen a human before tried to recreate one from memory. Her smile stretched too wide, her eyes were too perfectly round, and they didn't blink, not once. "You came," she said, her voice sounding like it was coming through an old radio. "They always come." I backed up a step. "I think I've got the wrong person." She matched my movement, stepping forward. "No, Timothy, you're exactly who we've been waiting for." I never told her my name. "How do you know me?" My mouth had gone completely dry. She tilted her head at an impossible angle, nearly touching her shoulder. "The desert remembers everyone who passes through. Vegas is just a thin skin over something much older." That's when I noticed the silence. Complete silence. In Vegas. No traffic, no distant music from the strip, nothing. Just my own breathing and the soft hum that seemed to be coming from the woman herself. "What do you want?" I managed to ask. Her smile widened even further, splitting her face in a way that human muscles shouldn't allow. "Just a small piece of you to keep. Everyone leaves something behind in Vegas. It's tradition." She raised her hand, and I saw that her fingers were too long, jointed in extra places. They seemed to extend as she reached toward me, stretching impossibly across the space between us. I ran, fucking bolted back toward the lights and noise of the strip. I could hear a soft clicking sound behind me, like insect legs on concrete, but I didn't look back. When I burst back onto Las Vegas Boulevard, everything was normal again. Crowds, noise, lights. I pushed my way through tourists until I reached our hotel, ran through the casino floor and found Jake, still at the same blackjack table. "Dude, you look like shit," he said when he saw me. "You were only gone like 5 minutes." 5 minutes, not the hour it had felt like. I tried to tell Jake what happened, but he just laughed it off, thought I was messing with him or had scored some bad drugs. Maybe that would have been a better explanation. We flew home the next day. I checked out early, couldn't stand another minute in that city. Jake thought I was overreacting, but something in Vegas had seen me, known my name, wanted a piece of me. The worst part? I think it got what it wanted. Since that night, I keep catching glimpses of something in mirrors. Not my reflection, but something behind it, watching. And sometimes when I'm falling asleep, I hear that soft, staticky voice whisper, "Thank you for your contribution, Timothy." I'm never going back to Vegas. Story 10, GPS said we were still 2 hours from Miami when the tank hit empty. Classic road trip mistake. I was driving while my girlfriend Alicia slept in the passenger seat. This was 2018, just after I'd graduated from FSU. We were headed to visit her family in Miami for Thanksgiving. "Babe, we need gas," I nudged her. Like immediately, Alicia stirred, checked her phone blearily. "Where are we?" "Middle of nowhere, Florida," I answered, squinting at a faded sign. "Looks like there's a town coming up in a mile. Gibsonton." I'm a Chicago guy, born and raised. Florida was still foreign territory to me back then. What I didn't know was that we were about to stumble into what locals call Showtown, USA. The town appeared suddenly, a dingy collection of trailers and weather-beaten buildings. No proper gas station in sight. The November evening was setting in fast, and I felt my anxiety spike as the car sputtered. "Just pull over there." Alicia pointed to what looked like a small convenience store with a single ancient pump outside. The place had no brand name, just MART in faded letters. As I pulled up, the car gave one final protest and died completely. Great. When I stepped out, the humidity hit me like a wall. So did the silence. For a town with visible signs of habitation, cars parked here and there, lights in windows, there wasn't a single person visible. "I've got a weird feeling about this place," Alicia whispered, gripping my arm as we approached the store. A bell jingled when we entered. The interior was dimly lit, shelves sparsely stocked with off-brand items. Behind the counter sat the largest woman I'd ever seen. Not just overweight, but gigantic, like circus performer large. She must have been close to 7 feet tall sitting down, with hands that could palm my entire head. "Need some help?" Her voice was surprisingly soft and high-pitched. Yeah, our car died. Could we get some gas?" I asked, trying not to stare. She smiled, revealing a row of tiny, pointed teeth. "Pump's broken, but my husband can help. He's good with cars." She grabbed a phone that looked comically small in her enormous hand and mumbled something I couldn't make out. "Where exactly are we?" Alicia asked while we waited. "Gibsonton," the woman answered. "Show folk town. Carnival workers, circus performers. We all winter here." That explained her size. What she said next sent a chill down my spine. "You two picked a bad night to visit. It's tribute night." Before I could ask what that meant, the door swung open. A man entered who was so completely average-looking that it was jarring after seeing the woman. Nothing remarkable about him at all. "Car trouble?" he asked cheerfully. "I'm Dale. I'll take a look for you." Something felt off about how normal he appeared. Too normal, like he was trying too hard. We followed him outside where darkness had fully settled. In the distance, I could hear what sounded like chanting. "What's that noise?" I asked. "Town gathering," Dale answered quickly. "Nothing interesting, just a yearly tradition." He popped my hood and leaned in with a flashlight. Not just gas. Your timing belt snapped. Won't be driving this anywhere tonight." My stomach dropped. So what do we do?" "We've got a motel down the road. You can stay there, and I'll fix your car in the morning," Dale offered, wiping his hands on a rag. "My cousin runs it." "Good rates." Alicia squeezed my hand hard. "Maybe we can call a tow truck," Dale laughed. "No service will come out here this late, and your phone won't work either." Town's in a dead zone. He was right. My phone showed no signal. The motel it is, I guess, I reluctantly agreed. Great. Let me just grab something from inside, and I'll drive you over. As soon as he disappeared into the store, Alicia hissed, Alex, we can't stay here. This place is wrong. Those people in the distance? Look. I turned toward where she was pointing. Through the trees, about a quarter mile away, I could make out lights, torches or bonfires, and silhouettes, people moving around them. Some of the shapes looked distorted, wrong proportions, impossible movements. It's just carnival people, I said, trying to convince myself. They probably look different because of the firelight. No, she insisted. I saw someone walking on all fours, but not like an animal, like something else. Dale emerged from the store with a duffel bag. Ready to go. He drove us in his pickup down a dark road. Neither of us spoke. The chanting grew louder, then softer as we passed whatever gathering was happening in the woods. The motel was a single-story building with maybe 10 rooms total. No other cars were parked outside. Last room on the end is free, Dale said, handing me a key with a plastic tag. I'll come get you in the morning. As he drove away, I noticed the duffel bag was gone from the truck bed. The room was basic but clean. As soon as we entered, Alicia started checking the windows. They're nailed shut, she whispered. I tried the TV, static on every channel. The bathroom had a small window that actually opened, but it was barely big enough for Alicia to squeeze through. We need to leave, she insisted. Now! And go where? We're miles from anywhere else. That's when we heard it, a soft scratching at the door, then a high childlike voice. New friends for the show? Can I see? I froze. Alicia gripped my arm so tight it hurt. The scratching continued, moving from the door to the window. Whatever was out there wasn't tall enough to look in. Just one peek, the voice called. I'm practicing for the tribute. Then another voice, Dale's. Get back to the circle. These ones aren't for you, but they're fresh. Their skin still fits them right. Go, now. We heard an inhuman grumbling, then something that sounded like too many legs scuttling away. I pressed my eye to the peephole. Dale stood there alone, looking directly at the door as if he knew I was watching. He smiled that too normal smile and held up the duffel bag. Change of plans, he called through the door. We need 2 more for tonight's tribute. Been a dry season. That's when the power went out, plunging us into darkness. I heard the lock on our door begin to turn from the outside. Alicia was already squeezing through the bathroom window. I barely made it through behind her as the room filled with the sound of multiple footsteps and that high, excited voice saying, Fresh ones! Finally. We ran through the darkness, away from the lights and chanting, away from whatever gathering was happening in Gibsonton that night. We ran until we hit the highway where, miraculously, a trucker stopped for us. I never reported what happened. Who would believe us? But sometimes I look up Gibsonton online. It's a real place with a real history as a carnival wintering ground. What I can never find is any mention of their annual tribute night. Thanks for watching. Don't leave before leaving a like to this video. Also hit the subscribe button to support my work. And as always, have a horrific nightmare, my dear.